Data Storytellers, it's one of our episodes where, due to popular demand, we have a guest back. We had Aaron on the podcast, and unfortunately, that wasn't an episode that I had the privilege to record. I think it was Paul who did it, but I wanted a piece of the pie, and I'm glad that I can be the one who actually reviews this fantastic playbook by Aaron Fossum from Norwegian Cruise Line. So, Aaron, welcome back on the show.
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks a lot, Lazo.
Absolutely. And the episode that we recorded before with you, it was one of our most popular ones. I don't know if it's the appeal of the brand, and everyone loves the idea of cruises and cruise ships, or it was the professional content, or maybe both, right? But I'm confident that this one will be even better. And of course, this assumption comes from my understanding of what we're about to explore here. So just to give the audience a little bit of a background here, so Aaron presented on our leading business change with Analytics and AI Masterclass in Nashville, Tennessee. We had a great time in Nashville, right? Not just because of Broadway and good food and delicious drinks, but also because we reviewed a few of these transformation playbooks of how leaders in data analytics transform the enterprise through the power of data. And your presentation, I think it was the last one, and boy, we finished with a bang because it was very, very powerful. People loved it, and I wanted to make sure that we can share some of that inspiration with the public and with the community at large. So without further ado, let's dive in. First, I would like to do a little bit of a refresher for those who don't know you yet. Those people who haven't seen the first episode but are tuning into this one. Can you just tell me a little bit about your role over at NCL, and maybe just for those people who don't know Norwegian Cruise Lines, what do you guys actually do?
Yeah, we sell cruises. We take people on fantastic journeys all over the world. Great ships, great food, great experiences. I've got another slide in the presentation that goes into a little bit more detail about who we are, but I really have the privilege of sending people on the vacations of a lifetime. It's a wonderful business to be in. I've been about 3 years with Norwegian Cruise Line. I've been about 7 years in the cruise industry overall. Took a little bit of a break in around 2020 and went back into consulting for a while. And then prior to that, I kind of grew up in the digital analytics industry. So for Norwegian, I lead our digital analytics team, which is part of our marketing analytics department within the marketing organization. And I serve all three of our brands. But I've had the privilege of kind of growing up with this weird little corner of analytics called digital analytics, which is basically measuring website behavior and what people are doing on the website. Starting in around 2000, at the end of the .com boom. Mm-hmm. It's been a great ride. It's a fun.
And I remember when we spoke for the first time. So is Norwegian actually a Norwegian company, by the way?
It is not.
It is not. Okay.
We're not. But the brand kind of goes all the way back to a founder, New Kloster. And there's a fascinating story for those who are really business nerds. There's a fantastic book called Devils of the Deep Blue Sea that talks about the foundation of Norwegian Cruise Line and Carnival Cruise Line, and kind of the evolution of the cruise business from taking people from Europe to the United States as a mode of transportation to more of a luxury vacation. That we know it today. It's a fascinating story if you're a business nerd like I am.
Well, I do love a good story, so I'm going to look into that. And it's funny because so I did not know whether Norwegian is a Norwegian company or not. So I remember the first time we spoke, because of your last name. So I'm from Europe, right? So I work with a bunch of Norwegians, and for some reason I expected a Norwegian accent. And and you said that no, that's just a coincidence. That's
it's a happy coincidence. My family does come from Norway. I like that much Norwegian, but I claim it. I carry the name. My wife did some genealogy and found that on the west coast of Norway is where my family comes from before they emigrated here to the United States.
Okay, maybe on one of those, maybe on one of those ships,
Right?
in the story. Who knows? Who knows? So that's fantastic. Also, it's interesting that the last podcast I recorded before this was with Alex Dragon, who's a VP of Enterprise Data and Analytics over 4 seasons. Also, his second appearance on the podcast. Wanted to come to Nashville, couldn't make it, and we talked about how to create these, beautiful, engaging, data-driven experiences in the hospitality space. So I feel like this is a really cool continuation of that. So let's dive in. So what are we going to talk about today?
Yeah, so I guess to kind of get right into it, we've developed kind of a process, and I would say that the stuff I'm about to share today, we're in process. We have not arrived as an organization, but we are heading in a direction. We're getting some great results as we go, and so really talking about how you plan and how you think about the process that you use. You've got a great data story, and now you need to translate the insights from that story into some kind of business action so it has the impact. How do we approach the process of sharing that information and seeing it through to its impact? We'll find that there are 3 different kinds of insights that we tend to share, three kinds of project that we tend to do in the analysis process. And I'm going to share a process or some thoughts about our journey, how we're improving how we deliver the insights in each of those 3 different contexts.
Absolutely. And it's so relevant because even in our advanced business communications and storytelling course, and that whole saga actually really boils down to how to close what we call the data action gap.
Yeah.
So
Right.
yeah, it's great to collect the data and analyze that data and pull out some patterns and insights from that, even to tell the story, put that into some sort of narrative. But where the rubber meets the road is, does that actually change what people do? Does it actually change the decisions that they make? And that's why I think this presentation was such a success in Nashville as well. So let's dive in.
All right. Well, first of all, I'm glad to be back. And we kind of teased this out a little bit earlier, but I work for Norwegian Cruise Line, actually Norwegian Cruise Line Holdings, which is a holding company representing 3 brands. You got Norwegian, which is kind of our premium contemporary brand. Oceania, which is kind of a premium brand that focuses on food and great destinations. And then Regent, which is an ultra luxury brand. Absolutely beautiful, gorgeous ships with artwork and delectable food. Between all 3 of those brands, we've got 32 ships with another 13 on the way over the coming years. And every year we carry about 2.5 million passengers to over 700 destinations, including 2 private islands. So it's really a great privilege to work in an industry where we get to help people of all kinds and their families have incredible travel experiences and vacations of a lifetime. We're especially proud that our Norwegian Luna, we announced a few months ago, is sailing in 2026 and now booking. She's a beautiful ship with great entertainment options. So what we're going to dive into today, if you look at the task of analytics organizations as delivering customer-centric insights to the business to optimize business outcomes or to serve your customers better, and then underlying that data products and data infrastructure, today's story we're going to really be focusing on how we deliver those customer-centric insights to the business in a way that achieves action. Now, I'm going to start with a controversial statement. Data is not valuable. And of course, we know that's not true because otherwise we wouldn't be here on this podcast. But data is not value unless decisions are made and implemented. So the first truth I'd like to share is that data is invaluable when decisions are made and implemented. The president of our company likes to ask me how is this going to help me sell more cruises? How is this going to help me get more people on vacation? Fundamentally, it's not just about making the decision, it's about implementing them. But we have a little bit of a challenge. There's a process by which data comes an insight, and then we share that insight with the people who are going to do something with that insight, make a decision, and then execute that decision. What I've found in my experience and in talking with a lot of my peers in the industry is that because hearts change slower than minds, we often, that gap you mentioned, that decision to action gap happens between where insight turns into knowledge and then become the decision. there's a lot of philosophy and psychology and theory that goes into that. We won't go deep into that right now. But one of the gaps I find too is before your insight can found a decision, people must adopt that knowledge as their own. Almost think of it
Mhm.
as though they came up with the insight themselves. And so there are different ways that we can deliver and think about how we deliver those insights to the business in different contexts in a way that helps the business stakeholders absorb that knowledge and ultimately make and execute decisions on that.
Mhm.
So I'm a big process guy, a bit of a process nerd. Process is simply a series of actions or steps taken in order to achieve a particular end. We describe process in a number of different ways. Everything from loose structure, like a general approach, to something very tightly structured and rigorous, like a ritual or a script. That becomes more important as we go through and look at the three different contexts, because depending on the question that you're answering through analytics, depends on whether you use a rigorous process or something that's a little bit more creative and discovery oriented. All this boils down to my third truth, which is a repeatable process enables consistent value. So I haven't seen anybody in the analytics industry who says, "Hey, I've got more people than I know what to do with." We tend to run lean, especially in digital analytics. We tend to run very lean, and so what I've found is that by creating some processes and guidelines to follow, we can streamline our insight generation operations in a way that allows us to spend less of our time and mental energy thinking about how we're going to produce or how we're going to share an insight, and more on the actual insight generation itself. We ask less, how should we structure this presentation? How should we share this with stakeholders? We spend more of our time like, what is this data actually telling us, and how does it help us sell more cruises? And that's because we've established some repeatable processes to enable that consistent value.
And also, I just had this insight that when you said, data is not valuable, it's a controversial statement. Obviously, it makes a point. And this line that people say, I know it kind of faded out from the hype cycle now, because now everyone's talking about AI. But I think a couple of years ago, everyone was saying that data is the new oil. Data is the
Yeah,
new oil. And even if you think about oil itself, like, oil is not valuable. It's
that's
it's
right.
a black sludge, right?
That's
So
right.
without a combustion engine,
Mhm.
or in whatever way you actually use and process that and turn it into motion, it's not valuable, right? So a
That's right.
repeatable process kind of speaks to that same idea too, that the engine works in a very specific way. If you
That's
want to
exactly
build a
right.
powerful engine, you need to follow specific steps. So I don't know if that analogy will break down at some point, but I see quite relevance there.
Absolutely, because much like oil, data needs to be processed and
Mm.
refined and delivered to the engine in
Hmm.
order to make it go. And it's the same thing with an insight. You have to discover the insight. You have to mine that data and then prepare it, distill it, refine it to find the true insights, and then deliver that at the end of the day. Deliver that to the engine that's going to take us where we want to go.
Hmm.
And what I've found in my experience is that there's basically three kinds of activities we do when doing the analysis. You've got what I call decision support, and a lot of organizations really start at this level. It's the most elementary building block, which is basically somebody in the business has a very specific question. They're looking for a very specific answer. They might be looking to understand how many visits are being drawn by a particular partnership, so they can make a quick decision as to whether or not that partnership is paying off. The scope is pretty limited, and they're just looking for a quick answer fast. So I'm looking at that as, I call that decision support. At the other end of the spectrum is what I call something creative discovery. This is, I've got a business problem. We're launching a new brand or a new product. We now understand, how customers are responding to that product and why they're responding. It's a very broad question, usually of larger impact and a little bit sometimes more strategic in nature. It requires a lot more creativity in terms of how you approach that analysis and delivering that analysis. And it usually takes a little bit longer. In between is something that I think there's an art form, and a lot of people have routine dashboards and business review meetings that really measure that heartbeat of the business or that cadence of the business. And what I've found, and you'll see as we go on in this presentation, there is an art form to taking that from a series of routine review meetings and a series of dashboards and trying to weave them together into a progressive heartbeat that propels the business forward. As I mentioned, each of these different types of analysis that we do and deliver have a different approach. And decision support, quick questions, quick answers, obviously use a very tightly structured and rigorous approach, whereas creative discovery, bigger questions that are more nebulous in nature, you follow a more loosely structured and creative approach. The words I like to use, decision support, we follow a script. You go out, you come to our internal website and you fill out a form with your very specific question. It goes into our ticketing system and we get you a very specific answer very fast. On the other end of that, there's more of a approach around creative discovery where we're going to do a lot more understanding the business question and working and interacting with more teams. So, decision support really follows a script. The creative discovery follows more of a creative approach. And in between that heartbeat and analytics really is more of a cadence, more kind of a rhythm of the business, which I've heard it called rhythm of business. So to start with, decision support, again, quick questions, quick answers. You want it to be a well-oiled machine, right? And you want to think of decision support in terms of tasks, not projects. Sometimes, getting the data to support the decision might inspire another project where you're working some data collection, but fundamentally you're looking for a quick in and a quick out. So you're looking to make that as streamlined as possible. The quick one-off questions I found never quite go away, but they're also not the highest value activity that an analytics team will undertake. And so you want to spend less of your energy doing that, making it that well-oiled machine, using things like automated decisioning and alerts. Maybe try to take the human out of the decision support, the simple stuff, enable more self-service, right? Not just email PDFs, but, training your end users, making, dashboards easy to access and understand. So you're trying to free up your analytics team members to spend more time on maintaining that cadence and the heartbeat and more of that creative analysis that I mentioned, the creative discovery. For us, we had a success implementing what I call a decision support service model. It's basically a ticketing system. Easy request intake. We have a SharePoint site that anybody in the organization who has an email, a Norwegian Cruise Line email address can access. They can send us a quick question. It goes right into our support workflow, which is loosely based on a Kanban agile construct. And then if you can, our team does not presently, but if you can, have some dedicated resources so you keep those quick in and out tasks in their own kind of swim lane. Because one of the things that can be very stressful on an analyst is when they have these very creative projects over here, but they're getting bombarded by urgent, I need this question quick, and they can never quite get around to that more creative, more impactful analysis because they're busy answering the question of the day.
Absolutely. Actually, this is one of the biggest pain points that we hear, that teams feel like that they are the report vending machine and they are stuck in the corner, taking punches, and that time and they can finally sit down and work on the more exciting, more nuanced, creative projects, they actually never get there. It's kind of like a mirage that they keep chasing, right? And so what you're proposing here is that by being very rigorous about building this well-oiled machine, that capacity will be freed up.
That's right. And, I had this conversation. They actually received some of this feedback in Nashville, like, why don't you just stop doing that? It's like, gosh, I'd love to. And I actually had that conversation, with more than one executive and more than one company. Like, hey, your analytics team is spending a lot of time just answering basic questions. They're not able to get to the truly impactful stuff. And the executive said the same thing. Well, just stop doing that. And then I'm like, I'd love to. The next day, they asked 3 different questions that had to be answered by the end of the day. So what I also noted is that as you train more data literacy across the organization, as you create more insight and that insight has more impact on the organization, you actually increase the amount of those questions because you have people thinking about the data. and they want data answers, but they may not have the technical skills or the data literacy built up at that point. So they still have a dependency on the analytics team. So the more you create a data culture in your organization, the more of this decision support you can expect to get. That means you're doing your job, but you still want to make that as efficient as possible, which is why customer centricity, in this case, our customers are our business partners who we work with, and helping them become more data literate, accessing, those are key to continuing, because at some point you get as far as you can developing efficiency on your own, and then you need to actually invest in training and education for your stakeholders so that they can self-support a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
So heartbeat analytics. We have a lot of meetings with our stakeholders, and this is where I see a lot of people, what I mentioned before, we've got a lot of dashboards, and we got a lot of one-off status meetings, and we spend a lot of meetings with those stakeholders, but they don't necessarily matriculate into one cohesive story or cadence. I like to change that from we have a lot of meetings with stakeholders to we have ongoing conversations and solid relationships. And it seems like a nuanced and kind of milquetoast statement, but the idea behind heartbeat analytics and this truth is that if we're doing our job as an analytics team, we are helping the organization be smarter, know our guests more, know our business better, know our website better. And that happens through a series of conversations that happen in the context of relationship. We understand our business and our stakeholders. They understand us. We have conversations that move us forward again, instead of just being a rote set of meetings. Because we've all seen this, right? You got the big business review meeting, right? That happens every couple of weeks. And you think about this, you spend 90 minutes in that review meeting by 6 teams, 15 minutes per team, and each team has 3 topics per team. In that big 90-minute review meeting, you're going to get about 5 minutes per topic and 20 people asking questions. You never go deep. And I can't tell you how many organizations I've worked with as a consultant, even before I got into the cruise industry, that had exactly this. And they were wondering why they weren't having more productive data conversations. It's because you're trying to do about 20 different things in the span of 90 minutes because you don't want to take the time across the organization. So you cram everybody in and you go data. And you get, at the end of that, you get meetings that run long. You miss topics because you're at the end of the agenda. The discussions are unsatisfying, and you get this massive list of action items. Oh, well, we should have this conversation in another meeting. Like, why don't we just have that other meeting first and then come to the big 90-minute review meeting and share the outcomes of those before or at that meeting? So that's why I say, take your organization from a series of standalone meetings to a curated cadence of conversations and actions. And we're actually in the process of this right now, and we're having some really good outcomes. I shared this back with our team after Nashville. I said, hey, this is what I said about us. And it was surprising the faces in that room kind of light up, realizing what we had actually been able to accomplish, even though we didn't necessarily know at the time. When you're in that environment, you might not necessarily recognize the awesome that you're doing. We started with that big bi-weekly meeting and a monthly presentation. And then, of course, there were the preparation meetings that happened before those bi-weekly big meetings, and then another presentation prep before the big monthly presentation. And then we have lots of status meetings and lots of ad hoc meetings. And so we've evolved this process to where we still have the bi-weekly big meeting, but it's a little bit different now than it was before. And I'll explain that as we go. Instead of having the meeting before the big meeting, we have a weekly insights email. So we hear that joke, this meeting could have been an email. We take all those things that we would ordinarily review and bring to that biweekly big meeting, and we send those out on Monday by the end of the day about what happened the week prior. And so what happens then is we begin discussing the action items, the insights. What do we need to adjust? Why do we think the data is telling us what it is? And then we come into that biweekly big meeting already informed, having done, not so much what are we going to say, how are we going to package the presentation, but actually having discussed the meat and the meaning of the data when we go into that biweekly big meeting. And so that biweekly big meeting ends up being more efficient because we're able to focus. People have already basically read into the data. They've already had a little bit of time to digest it. And so we come prepared with that knowledge to discuss what we're going to do and how we're going to make adjustments. Part of that is the status meetings have evolved into a series of routine working groups. So instead of, hey, why don't you guys go over here and have that status where we just go through the task list, we have working groups that are saying, hey, how do we improve website conversion? And we meet on a routine basis outside of this biweekly big meeting. And we use insights from that weekly insights email. Again, we're not doing this, 100% perfectly yet, but this is where we're evolving to, and we're already having some good success with it. Instead of those ad hoc meetings, again, with that theme of this meeting could have been an email, we use Microsoft Teams internally, and a lot of groups do. And so we've moved a lot of those kinds of meetings into the asynchronous collaboration with smaller action-oriented meetings. You might have a stand-up meeting that happens every day or something like that. That's more of your agile style, quick hit, but we've become a lot more efficient in the communication because we're thinking instead of, we're not treating everything like it's the first time we've done it, and we're not restarting a lot of conversations and reading people into it. We kind of have a machine that we're starting to get running in terms of this cadence.
Mm-hmm.
That monthly presentation then turns into more of a monthly conversation. By the time we have that monthly presentation, say with our chief marketing officer or brand president, they already know and have seen a lot of the insights. And so we can bring in a little bit more of the detail or a little bit more of the actionable components, maybe stuff that they hadn't heard that we want to, inform them about, and becomes more of a review and a conversation instead of, I kind of call it kabuki theater. We want to show, look at all the great insights and look at all the pretty analysis we did, and leaves the executives in the room saying, well, yeah, great. That's, cool story, bro. But how's this going to help me sell more cruises? And as a result of that change, preparing for that meeting, there's usually no incremental analysis done for that meeting now. We're simply extending the conversation from analysis that's already been done and shared. That's changing a little bit as this evolves. We are doing some more incremental analysis, but when we do that incremental analysis, it's to move that conversation forward. We're no longer doing busy work analysis just to kind of, show off our analytical capabilities.
Yeah, and actually being busy, I know that often, actually, I just literally this week, I took it out of my vocabulary. I'm just as guilty as anyone. Hey, how are you? Well, I'm busy. Actually, being busy is not a badge of honor. Being busy literally means that I don't get a lot done, right?
That's right.
So that's what it means. Busy work, even if you look at the etymological, backdrop on the word, it's never been used as a positive. Being busy just means that you're not really focused and you don't manage to kind of break through that clutter of the mundane and create something meaningful. So I love that. And actually, like what you're talking about here, it's such a huge issue in large organizations. Some people can't even believe that surely this cannot be the case, right? That an organizational culture can be so weighed down by something like this. And at the end of the day, the lack of focus is what really kills these big initiatives, these big transformations. And what you're introducing here is focus. That's what I see. Every single thing there, make sure that you go from this dispersed, being spread thin posture to no, we're very focused on a specific thing and actions, and then just really put everything that's not necessary to be discussed face to face into other platforms so that when you get that precious time together, you can make it count.
That's right. Focus is so important. And fortunately, we're blessed with great executive leadership that is really good at kind of distilling for us, what are we working on? So we know, what opportunities we're capitalizing on, what problems we're solving, and we can approach it in more focus. A big part of that is because we have really solid leadership that does a great job of distilling that for us. And that allows us to understand, what we're doing and why we're doing it. And so we can begin our analysis work right from the get-go, with our outcomes in mind. And of course, you can always get better at that focus. You get better at quantifying the objectives, and we have all those things. But when it comes right down to when I look at what we've been able to achieve, a lot of it's been because we have really good leadership that's helping us say, no, we're working on this.
Mm-hmm.
Something our brand president frequently says, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And it's that same
Hmm.
kind of idea of, we don't do stuff just to look busy, like we're doing a bunch of stuff, right? We know why we're doing what we're doing. And then we approach that, with an appropriate sense of urgency. I don't want to act like we're just kind of, sitting around drinking our tea.
Mm-hmm.
There's an appropriate sense of urgency, but there's not that scramble. And when you have a cadence of conversations and actions versus kind of a series of standalone meetings, you eliminate a lot of that communication thrash, because you've got the right people having the right meetings at the right time and the right cadence. And then you take that time and understand how those working group conversations roll up to that big alignment meeting that happens once every couple of weeks.
Absolutely. And what would you recommend to those people who are not fortunate or blessed to have that kind of leadership in place? Like, how would you go about changing that?
Yeah. It goes, so the answer may not be entirely satisfying, but it goes back to the idea that hearts change slower than minds.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and now I'm going to get a little bit theoretical, but it's that idea that, hey, let's say we have a week that we didn't particularly like the outcomes of a week, right? And so all the VPs go into their meeting, we review the week's results, and they're like, everybody do something, right? And it takes a lot of energy to say, okay, gotcha, right? But what is it we expected to happen? And as
Mm-hmm.
the analyst or the analytics team, and this is where you need to work with your analytics leadership. If you're a leader, then do this. If you're an analyst, work with your leader to help define the problems, to help define that area of focus. That may require a lot of repetition, and the discipline of starting with the why, that discipline of starting instead of, everybody look busy, but like taking that one, it's just the briefest of steps back.
Mm.
And I can't tell you how many times, and most analysts or analytics professionals on this podcast are going to identify with this. If we would have just taken that 30 minutes to get the key, principles in a room and say, what is it we're trying to do here, would save hours and hours of meetings and communication thrash.
Mm-hmm.
But oftentimes it's like we jump to that action, right? And, because we want to look busy, we want to solve it fast. We don't have time to sit here and navel gaze by talking about what what our objectives are, right? That's too academic. That's too theoretical. Let's jump in and do something. And then you find that, you've invested 2 weeks and, hundreds of man hours, hundreds of people hours, and you have to have that meeting anyway that says, what are we trying to do? Let's pull it back.
Mm-hmm.
So just start. If you're not in an organization that does that inherently, God bless you. You got a lot of hard work to do, and it's just bring that. Or one of my favorite tools for doing that is just assume it and then state it. And what I found is if you're the one who says, in the meeting, what are you trying to accomplish? When I look at this is what we're trying to accomplish. And so the analysis that we're presenting is designed to help us accomplish this objective. You define it for yourself, and you'll get some feedback on that depending. But if you're not getting that direction, set that direction for yourself and be bold and be courageous in doing so.
Mm-hmm. And even if you zoom out, so kind of connected to this is that the most successful organizations are really good at identifying at any given time that one thing that needs your attention.
Mm-hmm.
And they are usually comfortable with letting everything else burn a little bit if it needs to burn, right? Because that one single thing that's the most important, that's why you should actually concentrate all your effort. Now, of course, in reality, it's a little bit more nuanced, but that's the direction, right? That instead of just doing things, let's be intentional with what we're doing.
Intentionality is everything. It really is everything. And that's when you get into like, hey, boy, you should see the daggers that get stared at me sometimes. Like, is this actually even a problem? And people are like, wow, what do you mean? Everybody says, everybody knows. What are you second to? I'm like, well, yeah, but the take rate on this particular product is like 95%. So like, what, and what comes out of that conversation is, maybe it is a challenge, but we get a better definition of what that challenge. In my example of a take rate on a particular product, maybe it's not the actual take rate of the products. It's how the merchandising of that product is influencing, the actual sale of the cruise to begin with, right? It's just asking that question, like, is this even a problem? Like I said, you get some pretty visceral reactions when you ask the question, but inevitably it leads to a better understanding of the problem that you're trying to solve.
Absolutely. And I know that, in those situations when emotions run high as well, even just saying that, hey, just playing devil's advocate here for 30 seconds to make sure that whatever we're about to do will deliver the highest impact, right? And that can make it a little bit easier to solve, and then puts people into a posture where they can be more receptive. But sometimes it's as they say, war is not a perfect, clean effort, right? So
that's right. The best laid battle plans go out the window the moment the first shot's fired. So that's kind of the heartbeat piece. Now the creative discovery this is the fun stuff that every analyst dreams of doing. It's high impact. It's broad topic. And for us, it's kind of a work in progress. It's kind of where we are in the evolution. We've got a pretty good heartbeat going. We're working on improving it. Now we're really getting better at how we deliver creative discovery. The process that a lot of teams start with goes something like this. Somebody in the C-suite asks a question. They say, I need the answer ASAP. So by the way, right now we're treating this creative big question like a, quick hit decision support question. I need this as soon as possible. The request comes back to the analytics team. And of course the analytics team is like, they weren't in the room. So they're like, they want what? What do they want? And so we hustle up to get a response to a question that may not be perfectly well defined, and inevitably we leave crumbs on the table. We haven't necessarily answered the question in a meaningful or actionable way because we didn't necessarily take the time to answer it. So inevitably we do that analysis, and we go to our business partner stakeholders and say, heads up, we're about to say something that you might not like, and here we go into the presentation, right? So we have the presentation, a bunch of questions get answered. There's a lot of fallout from that because you said something about somebody's, you might have called somebody's baby ugly and you tried to give them the heads up, but you didn't. You had to get the question, fast. It might not even be the right question anyway. And then at the end of all that process, it's like, did we take any action? 100% of the time we take action. Is it over yet? Where's my scotch, right? So we experimented with something that's a little bit more, again, methodical with the intentionality and the focus. When we get one of those questions, we don't immediately jump to the analysis. Now we're trying again to train ourselves out of that habit, that knee-jerk habit of like, hey, I just got a question, go get a bunch of data. But actually ask, what is the business problem? Again, these are not long conversations, but they do need to be thoughtful. Give us a clear objective, understand the relevant context. The business took this action. This is what we're seeing. This is what we would like to see. This is the objective we're trying to iterate toward. This is the decision that we're trying to make or support. Having a clear understanding of that business problem allows us to conduct a thoughtful analysis. And we come back and say, hey, here's a plan for that analysis. And you've got to give, when the question is big, when the question is maybe vague, right? You've got to allow adequate time for that analysis. And in a business context, securing that adequate time to perform thoughtful analysis can be difficult because we are addicted to this urgency. It's one of the things I said earlier, and I actually hate the phrase, sense of urgency. It's like, we all know that, every day that goes by is another opportunity that we're, another opportunity to get somebody on a great vacation, right? So every day that goes by that we're not optimizing that as a day that we're not optimizing, the people who are able to enjoy our vacations, right? But you have to secure the time for that thoughtful analysis. Say, we need to knock down a lot of doors. We need to, pick over a bunch of rocks. We're not going to sit there in our ivory towers navel gazing, but we need some time to do a thoughtful and thorough job of just collecting the data, let alone, making some sense of it.
Mm.
Then pretty early in that process, we'll go and, collaborate and even co-create with the business stakeholders. So we're trying to get, when we do this creative discovery, we're trying to get out of the idea of, okay, analytics is going to go behind the curtain, right? Do a bunch of maths and then come back, from the mountain with two tablets in hand, saying, here are our findings, and then start the conversation flat-footed. Instead, we're like, we'll get that time for thoughtful analysis, but part of that thoughtful analysis is engaging with the subject matter experts in the business and co-creating with them and helping them discover, hey, here's an interesting signal. What do you think of that? And do that iteratively. So we're not just going away, making a bunch of assumptions. We're actually co-creating in real time. What that means is, instead of saying, hey, we had some findings, and giving people kind of that last minute heads up before we go present our findings to executive leadership, usually when we present to the sponsor, we bring those collaborators with us. A lot of times there's actions already in progress. Hey, here's what we found. Here's the remediation that we already took place. Here's what we found. Here's how we're capitalizing on the opportunity that we uncovered. And in some cases, we've even started having those people present on our behalf. I like to say, the best analytics presentation is one where analytics is in the back of the room.
Mm-hmm.
The decision is front and actually the positive impact of the decision is front and center, and the data inspired it, but analytics isn't even part. To be fair, this is not necessarily the best part for optics and in the corporate, political world, but I like to say that analytics are like ninjas. Good analysts are like ninjas. They
Mm-hmm.
get in, they do awesome, they make a huge impact, and nobody knows they were there, right?
Absolutely.
So we present to the sponsor, and usually those collaborators come with us, a lot of times. And then ultimately making sure that you take action. And that's where you go back into the heartbeat. So when we come up with an outcome out of this creative discovery process, we inject that back in the heartbeat. We might add something to that weekly insights email that kind of tracks whatever decision or whatever action we're taking. We'll send that back to the working groups, and then, do some other things to broadcast those insights.
Absolutely. And from a storytelling perspective, right? So it's kind of like Samwise Gamgee in The Lord of the Rings. It's like he is the hero. He was the hero of the story all along as the supporting character. But at the same time, when you tell stories about analytics, because of all the work that you put into it, that's when people tune out, right? And that's not how you build these fruitful long-term alliances and relationships. If you can put the spotlight on your stakeholders where the spotlight belongs, to be fair,
Right.
and then make sure that also for the benefit of everyone involved, that the people kind of know that the hero of the story at some point, the crucial component was good analytics work, then everyone wins.
That's right. That's right. And, to kind of go back to that oil analogy, right? When you're watching NASCAR, when you're watching F1, you don't stand back admiring the gas, right? You're watching the cars whip around the track, right? You're looking at the outcomes. You're looking at the awesome that's happening, and that's where we spend our time. Now, of course, none of that happens without the gas, right? But we don't spend our time admiring the gas. And likewise, when it comes to presenting some of these insights, focusing on that execution, focusing on those decisions, and even better, if we can already have some of those, some of those actions in progress. The executives I talk to love that when we say, hey, here's a data signal we saw, here's a decision and an action we took, we're still waiting for the final results of the A/B split test that we initiated, but here's what we've got so far. Love that, right?
Absolutely.
So, and then I had some questions that we presented in Nashville.
Oh yeah,
things for everybody to think about if you're at home. How we better structure our analytics process. The big thing with all that, again, through all these different stories, is remembering, all these happen with some kind of a process. And a process doesn't mean that you are lockstep, rigid, and not creative in your approach. when you're doing that decision and that decision support quick question, you keep to a tight script there because you're trying to be as efficient as possible. Then you run that through a cadence, and that cadence has some kind of a process that's somewhat rigid, but fairly flexible in terms of, like, for example, we don't have like subcommittees that are defined. The groups that I mentioned, the working groups that are kind of the core of this, just kind of happened. Right. We don't even really call them. They're just kind of recurring groups on teams that just kind of organically took shape. And that's how by the way, that's how you know that you're creating heart change in the organization, is when you don't have to come down from on high and say, this is how we'll structure, but the structure organically creates itself. And that's kind of what's happened around this heartbeat. And then creative discovery, you take more of a broad-based approach that kind of says, are we doing all the things? So.
Absolutely. And would you mind actually just running through these questions, because some people will be listening
Sure.
in their cars, right? So they don't necessarily see it, but it's just some good ideas for them to maybe bring to their teams, and just run through some of these questions, because after Nashville, I know that people found it super valuable.
Yeah, these are great questions to ask of yourself and your team. The first one is, how can we better structure our analytics processes to consistently deliver value?
Mm-hmm.
The reason that question is phrased that way, again, intentionality, right? Mm-hmm. Because a lot of times they say, we need a process, we need an intake form, we need Jira, we need Kanban, we need Agile, process. You got to remember, it's about consistently delivering value. And so when you think about these processes, you're trying to put in the minimum amount of guardrails necessary to deliver that consistent value. If you're over engineering your process, then you're going to actually choke out and constrain that value. So ask yourself thoughtfully, how can we better structure our analytics processes to consistently deliver value? The second question then gets into that decision support piece. How can we leverage dashboards, automation, and alerts to reduce and streamline ad hoc questions? The one thing I haven't mentioned here is artificial intelligence. I do believe that artificial intelligence will be a great helper as that matures. But how can we streamline those ad hoc questions and reduce the amount of our team's energy going into that decision support as a percentage of what we do overall? The third question kind of gets into that heartbeat analytics piece, which is, what can we do to move from a meeting heavy culture to more curated, action oriented discussions? And like I just mentioned, I would encourage you to think, organically, think heart change here. When you say curated just means taken care of and organized. It doesn't necessarily mean rigid. You're in this subcommittee or you're not, right? I've seen those kinds of task forces created, and they can be sometimes there's a necessity, right? You go solve this problem, right? But when you're talking about kind of those ongoing conversations, it's okay for them to kind of happen organically. To say, this is the conversation that needs to happen, and these are the kinds of people who need to look at this part of the business. And then here's another, part of the business that needs to be discussed. And here's kind of the people who need to be part of that. And just let those groups kind of organically form, and people will move in and out of those groups. So you're not looking for a tight structure, but you're looking to a curated conversation versus just meetings. And the final one is around creative discovery, which honestly is the hardest one to get to, in my opinion, is how can we refine our approach to creative discovery? Number one, to allow ourselves to self-direct our analysis. Our chief marketing officer loves to tell us we want an analytics team who asks more questions than they answer, which sometimes, like, being the fact that we answer usually our own questions mathematically might not work. But the point being that we should have the curiosity and instill that curiosity throughout the organization, be a leader in directing, what the important questions are. And then also add accountability, ensure action is taken. So at the end of that creative discovery process, there has to be some kind of feedback loop that says, hey, that insight we delivered, did you take any action on it? And if the answer is no, that's fine too. Let's record that down and understand why no action was taken. Either, the insight was, not adopted, or there were other, compelling reasons we didn't. But how do we refine our approach to creative discovery to self-direct our analysis and to add accountability to that process around action?
Absolutely. And I remember in Nashville, we had some great conversations around this. And it can be done with peers, but also with your own team. And maybe, as you said, maybe just with yourself as these questions and the answers might surprise you.
Yeah,
So,
I will say one other thing I didn't put in here, but it is a passionate point for me is
mhm,
in any of these things, we changed how we operate first. In the previous podcast I did, we talked about how we brought agile to that process, which really is kind of that decision support story. And the first thing is, before anybody even knew we were adopting agile, before anybody knew we were using Jira, we started changing how we operated on the back end. And if you want to
mhm,
lead this kind of change, you have to change how you operate as a team first, show how that's been successful, and then what you'll find is other teams will be like, hey, I get it. They'll adopt your way of working. And in some cases with the agile, we've had other areas in the marketing organization come in and say, tell us more about your intake process, and
mhm.
be able to kind of influence the operations of the rest of the organization.
That's a great storytelling insight too. So instead of telling someone, "Hey, do this," or "You should consider this," you can just tell, "Well, this is what we've been doing, and this is the results that we've been seeing."
Yeah, I mean, it takes courage to do that, because in our consensus based culture, we kind of like,
Mm,
hey, I got this great idea. We want to get everybody on board, and it's
mhm,
like, just do the thing in a small. You are you are your own best laboratory. Run a
mhm.
test on yourself. If it works, then say, here's what we've been doing that works real well, versus waiting for permission to do awesome things.
You know the cliche of be the change that you want to see in the world. To kind
Exactly.
of apply.
Exactly.
Now we cannot end the podcast on that note though. So what are you excited about now for 2025? So that can be this was the presentation, and I
Yeah.
loved it again. Whenever I actually see it, I think this is my literally the third time that I'm seeing this presentation end to
Yeah.
end, and I'm always getting new insights. It's very easy for me to engage with it. But 2025, this podcast will be probably released in a couple of months, I
Yeah.
think, based on the backlog, probably around like April timeframe, I think.
Yeah.
So what's your plan and ambition and your vision for the rest of the year? What makes you excited?
Gosh, a few things. I would say the business, the team, and the future. This is a big year for Norwegian Cruise Line. We've got the Aqua sailing. I have the privilege of being on one of the inaugural cruises on that when it comes up later this spring.
Mm.
I'm thrilled to see she's beautiful. Uh, she's part of the Prima line, which is just absolutely beautiful ship. So I'm super excited about that. We actually have upgraded our More at Sea package or our Free at Sea package to what is now More at Sea. It is probably the greatest value in terms of beverage and dining and
Mm.
Wi-Fi in the industry. So I'm really excited to see people enjoying that from a business standpoint. Um, this is I have the privilege, the blessing of working with the best analytics team I've ever worked with. And I've worked with some really great ones. I think back, shout out to those who were part of the Society Consulting Group back around 2010, in a previous role that I had. But this group really super low ego, super creative, super results oriented, really good blend. And it's just I wake up every morning just grateful that I get to work with this high class group of people. And that goes all across not just our analytics team, but really the marketing floor. Just a bunch of really great professionals, and it's really a privilege and a blessing to be able to work here. So I look forward to that. And then in the future, my excited thing is really focusing on what we've called forward-looking EBITDA focused analysis. So really starting to get not, I'm careful to say, stop short of saying predictive, because that's more of the advanced analytics, and that's a capability that we're starting to build out as an organization. But really, focus more of our effort instead of what happened, to saying, what do we need to happen? What's happening now? What do we think is going to happen tomorrow? And really focused on that as just kind of a strategy. So
Mm.
a lot of
And I
really
can
exciting.
vouch for the professionalism of the team, right? So I think I had the privilege of working with you now since 2022. I believe that was the
Yeah.
first time, and it's been quite an evolution. And and your collaborative posture and definitely the insights that you've been bringing from the team, it's very very impressive. And just recently moved out from downtown Vancouver. We lived in Cole Harbor, so I saw the cruise ships sail out from that area. So I don't get my daily dose of cruise ships anymore because we moved out of downtown. The family is growing, right? But through working with you, I still get to be a part of it. So it's been a pleasure and an honor, sir. And I look forward to our collaboration and what the future brings. It's been quite a ride so far.
All right, thanks so
quite
very
a cruise.
Yeah, come cruise with us.
Yeah, absolutely. And until next time.
All right, thanks.